Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I'm reading from The Sign of the Four, written by Arthur Conan Doyle in 1890. This novel features his character Sherlock Holmes, a detective who excels in observation, deduction, logic, and forensics. Assisting Holmes is Dr. John Watson, a former army surgeon. The novel is told from Watson's point of view. I do readings twice a week. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. This is the last chapter, so I'm considering next doing The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This final chapter was quite long, so I had paused midway in the midst of Jonathan Small's story. He and his confederates had the treasure and marveled at the riches and jewels. We still need to hear how the treasure chest finally got to England. Chapter 12, The Strange Story of Jonathan Small, Part 2. Jonathan continued. After we'd counted our treasures, we put them back into the chest and carried them to the gateway to show them to Muhammad Singh. Then we solemnly renewed our oath to stand by each other and be true to our secret. We agreed to conceal our loot in a safe place until the country should be at peace again, and then to divide it equally among ourselves. We carried the box, therefore, into the same hall where we had buried the body, and there, under certain bricks in the best preserved wall, we made a hollow and put our treasure. We made careful note of the place, and next day I drew 4 plans, one for each of us, and put the sign of the 4 of us at the bottom, for we had sworn that we should each always act for all, so that none might take advantage. Well, there's no use my telling you, gentlemen, what came of the Indian Mutiny. After Wilson took Delhi and Sir Colin relieved Lucknow, the back of the business was broken. Peace seemed to be settling upon the country, and we 4 were beginning to hope that the time was at hand when we might safely go off with our shares of the plunder. In a moment, however, our hopes were shattered by our being arrested as the murderers of Ahmed. It came about in this way. When the Rajah put his jewels into the hands of Ahmed, he did it because he knew that he was a trusty man. But what does this Rajah do but take a second, even more trusty servant and set him to play the spy on the first? This second man was ordered never to let Ahmed out of his sight, and he followed him like a shadow. He went after him that night and saw him pass through the doorway. Of course, he thought he'd taken refuge in the fort and applied for admission there himself the next day, but could find no trace of Ahmed. A thorough search was quickly made, and the body was discovered. Thus, at the very moment that we thought all was safe, we were all 4 seized and brought to trial on the charge of murder. 3 of us because we had held the gate that night, and the 4th because he had known to be in the company of the murdered man. Not a word about the jewels came out at the trial, for the Rajah had been deposed and driven out of India, so no one had any particular interest in them. The murder, however, was clearly made out, and it was certain we all must have been concerned with it. All of us got penal servitude for life. It was rather a queer position that we found ourselves in then. There we were, all 4 tied by the leg and with precious little chance of ever getting out again, while we each held a secret which might have put each of us in a palace if we could only have made use of it. I just held on and bided my time. At last it seemed to me to have come. I was changed from Agra to Madras, from there to Blair Island in the Andamans. There are very few white convicts at this settlement, and as I had behaved well from the first, I soon found myself a sort of privileged person. I was given a hut in Hope Town, and I was left pretty well much to myself. It's a dreary, fever-stricken place, and all beyond our little clearings was infested with wild cannibal natives who were ready to blow a poisoned dart at us if they saw a chance. There was digging and ditching and yam planting and a dozen other things to be done, so we were busy enough all day, though in the evenings we had a little time to ourselves. Among other things, I learned to dispense drugs for the surgeon and picked up a smattering of his knowledge. All the time I was on the lookout for a chance to escape, but it's hundreds of miles from any land, and There's little or no wind in those seas, so it was a terribly difficult job to get away. The surgeon, Dr. Somerton, was a fast, sporting young chap, and the other young officers would meet in his rooms of an evening and play cards. The surgery, where I used to make up my drugs, was next to his sitting room, the small window between us. Often, if I felt lonesome, I used to turn out the lamp in the surgery, and standing there I could hear their talk and watch their play. There was Major Sholto, Captain Morstan, and Lieutenant Bromley Brown, who were in command of the native troops, and there was the surgeon himself and 2 or 3 prison officials, crafty old hands who played a nice, sly, safe game. A very snug little party they used to make. Well, there was one thing which very soon struck me, and that was that the soldiers used always to lose and the civilians to win. These prison chaps had done little else than play cards ever since they'd been at the Adamans, and they knew each other's game to a point, while the others just played to pass the time and threw their cards down anyhow. Night after night, the soldiers got up poorer men, and the poorer they got, the more keen they were to play. Major Sholto was the hardest hit. He used to pay in notes and gold at first, but soon it came to notes of hand and for big sums. All day he would wander about as black as thunder, and he took to drinking a good deal more than was good for him. One night he lost even more heavily than usual. I was sitting in my hut when he and Captain Morstan came stumbling along on the way to their quarters. They were bosom friends, those two, and never far apart. The Major was raving about his losses. "It's all up, Morstan," he was saying as they passed my hut. "I shall have to send in my papers. I'm a ruined man." "Nonsense, old chap," said the other, slapping him on the shoulder. "I've had a nasty facer myself, but..." And that was all I could hear, but it was enough to set me thinking. A couple of days later, Major Sholto was strolling on the beach, so I took the chance of speaking to him. "I wish to have your advice, Major," said I. "Oh, well, Small, what is it?" he asked, taking his cheroot from his lips. "I wanted to ask you, sir," I said, "who is the proper person to whom hidden treasure should be handed over? I know where $500,000 worth lies, and as I cannot use it myself, I thought perhaps the best thing that I could do would hand it over to the proper authorities, and then perhaps they would get my sentence shortened for me." "$500,000, Small," he gasped, looking hard at me to see if I was in earnest. "Oh, quite that, sir, in jewels and pearls. Lies that ready for anyone. And the queer thing about it is that the real owner is outlawed and cannot hold property, so it belongs to the first comer." To government, Small," he stammered. "To government." But he said it in a halting fashion, and I knew in my heart that I got to him. "You think then, sir, that I should give the information to the Governor-General?" said I, quietly. "Oh, well, you must not do anything rash, or that you might repent. Let me hear all about it, Small. Give me the facts." I told him the whole story, with small changes so that he could not identify the places. When I'd finished, he stood stock still and full of thought. I could see by the twitch of his lip that there was a struggle going on within him. "This is a very important matter, Small," he said at last. "You must not say a word to anyone about it. Now, I shall see you again soon." 2 nights later, he and his friend Captain Morstan came to my hut in the dead of light with a lantern. "I want you just to let Captain Morstan hear that story from your own lips, Small," said he. I repeated it as I told it before. "It rings true, eh?" said he. "It's good enough to act upon?" Captain Morstan nodded. "Look here, Small," said the Major. "We have been talking it over, my friend here and I, I've come to the conclusion that this secret of yours is hardly a government matter at all, a private concern of your own, which, of course, you have the power of disposing of as you think best. Now, the question is, what price would you ask for it? We might be inclined to take it up, and at least look into it if we could agree as to terms." He tried to speak in a cool, careless way, but his eyes were shining with excitement and greed. "Why, as to that, gentlemen," I answered, trying to be cool, but feeling as excited as he did, "well, there's only one bargain which a man in my position can make. I shall want you to help me to my freedom and to help my 3 companions to theirs. We shall then take you into partnership and give you a 5th share to divide it between you." He said. "A 5th share? It's not very tempting." "It would come to 50,000 apiece," said I. "Well, but how can we gain your freedom?" he said. "You know very well that you ask an impossibility." "Nothing of the sort," I answered. "I've thought it all out to the last detail. The only bar to our escape is that we can get no boat fit for the voyage and no provisions to last us for so long a time. There are plenty of little yachts and yawls at Calcutta or Madras which would serve our turn well. Do you bring one over? We shall engage to get aboard her by night, and if you drop us on any part of the Indian coast, you will have done your part of the bargain." "If there are only one of you," he said. "None or all," I answered. "We have sworn it. The 4 of us must always act together." "You see, Morstan," said he, "small as a man of his word. He does not flinch from his friend. I think we may very well trust him." "It is a dirty business," the other answered. "Yet, as you say, the money would save our commissions handsomely." "Well, Small," said the Major, "we must, I suppose, try and meet you. We must first, of course, test the truth of your story. Tell me where the box is hid, and I shall get leave of absence and go back to India in the monthly relief boat to inquire into the affair." "Not so fast," said I, growing colder as he got hot. "I must have the consent of my 3 comrades. I tell you that it is 4 or none of us." "Nonsense," he broke in. "What have 3 black fellows to do with our agreement?" "Black or blue," said I, "they're in with me, and we should all go together." Well, the matter ended by a second meeting at which Mohammed Singh, Abdullah Khan, and Dost Akbar were all present. We talked the matter over, and at last we came to an arrangement. We were to provide both the officers with charts of the part of the Agra fort and mark the place on the wall where the treasure was hid. Major Sholto was to go to India to test our story. If he found the box, he was to leave it there, to send out a small yacht provision for a voyage, which was to lie off Rutland Island, and to which we were to make our way, and finally return to his duties. Captain Morstan was then to apply for leaves of absence, to meet us at Agra, and there we were to have a final division of the treasure, he taking the major's share as well as his own. All this we sealed by the most solemn oaths that the mind could think of, that the lips uttered. I sat up all night with paper and ink, and by the morning I had the 2 charts all ready and signed with the sign of the 4, that is, of Abdullah, Akbar, Muhammad, myself. Well, gentlemen, I worry you with my long story, and I know that my friend Mr. Jones is impatient to get me safely stowed in Choki. I'll make it as short as I can. The villain Sholto went off to India, but he never came back again. His uncle had supposedly died, leaving him a fortune, and he'd left the army. Morstan went over to Agra shortly afterwards and found, as we expected, that the treasure was indeed gone. The scoundrel had stolen it all without carrying out one of the conditions on which we had sold him the secret. From that day I lived only for vengeance. I thought of it by day and I nursed it by night. It became an overpowering, absorbing passion with me. I cared nothing for the law, nothing for the gallows. To escape, to track down Sholto, to have my hand upon his throat, that was my one thought. Even the Agra treasure had come to be a smaller thing in my mind than the slaying of Sholto. Well, I have set my mind on many things in my life, never one which I did not carry out. One day, when Dr. Somerton was down with a fever, a little Andaman islander was picked up by a convict gang in the woods. He was sick to death and had gone to a lonely place to die. I took him in hand, and though he was as venomous as a young snake, and after a couple of months I got him all right and able to walk. Well, he took a kind of fancy to me then and would hardly go back to his woods, and always hanging about my hut. I learned a little of his lingo from him, and this made him all the fonder of me. Tonga, for that was his name, was a fine boatman and owned a big roomy canoe of his own. When I found that he was devoted to me and would do anything to serve me, I saw my chance of escape. I talked it over with him. He was to bring his boat round on a certain night to an old wharf which was never guarded, and there he was to pick me up. I gave him directions to have several gourds of water and a lot of yams and coconuts and sweet potatoes. He was staunch and true, was little Tonga. No man ever had a more faithful mate. At the night named, he had his boat at the wharf, and Tonga had brought all his earthly possessions with him, his arms and his gods. Among other things, he had a long bamboo spear and some adamant coconut matting, which I made a sort of sail. For 10 days we were beating about, trusting to luck. On the 11th we were picked up by a trader which was going from Singapore to Jeddah with a cargo of Malay pilgrims. They were a rum crowd, and Tonga and I soon managed to settle down among them. They had one very good quality. They let you alone and asked no questions. Well, if I were to tell you all the adventures that my little chum and I went through, you would not thank me, for I'd have you here till the sun was shining. Here and there we drifted about the world, something always turning up to keep us from London. All the time, however, I never lost sight of my purpose. I would dream of Sholto at night, and 100 times I've killed him in my sleep. At last, however, some 3 or 4 years ago, we found ourselves in England. I had no great difficulty in finding where Sholto lived, and I soon found that he still had the jewels. Then I tried to get at him in many ways, but he was pretty sly and always had 2 prize fighters, besides his sons and his Khitmudgar, on guard over him. One day, however, I got word that he was dying. I hurried at once to the garden, mad that he should slip out of my clutches like that, and looking through the window I saw him lying in his bed with his sons on each side of him. I'd have come through and taken my chances with the 3 of them, only even as I looked at him his jaw dropped, and I knew he was gone. I snuck into his room that same night, although, and searched his papers to see if there's any record of where he'd hidden the jewels, but there was not a line, however, so I came away bitter and savage as a man could be. Before I left, I bethought me that if I ever met my Sikh friends again, it would be a satisfaction to know I had left some mark of our hatred. So I scrawled down the sign of the 4 of us, as it had been on the chart, and I pinned it on his bosom. It was too much that he should be taken to the grave without some token from the men he had robbed and befooled. We earned a living at this time by my exhibiting poor Tonga at fairs and other such places as the Black Cannibal. He would eat raw meat and dance his war dance, so we always had a hatful of pennies after a day's work. I still heard all the news from Pondicherry Lodge, and for some years there was no news to hear, except they were hunting for the treasure. At last, however, came what we'd been waiting for so long. The treasure had been found. It was up at the top of the house, in Mr. Bartholomew Sholto's chemical laboratory. I came at once and had a look at the place, but I could not see how with my wooden leg I was to make my way up to it. I learned, however, about a trapdoor in the roof, and also about Mr. Sholto's supper hour. It seemed to me that I could manage the thing easily enough through Tonga. I brought him out with me with a long rope wound around his waist. He could climb like a cat, and he soon made his way through the roof, but as ill luck would have it, Bartholomew Sholto was still in the room, to his cost. Tonga thought he'd done something very clever in killing him, but for when I came up by the rope, I found him strutting about as proud as a peacock. Very much surprised was he when I made at him with a rope's end and cursed him for a little bloodthirsty imp. I took the treasure box and let it down and slid down myself, having first left the sign of the 4 upon the table, to show that the jewels had come back at last to those who had most right to them. Tonga then pulled up the rope, closed the window, and made off the way that he'd come. I don't know that I've anything else to tell you. I had heard a waterman speak of the speed of Smith's launch at the Aurora, so I thought she'd be a handy craft for our escape, and I engaged old Smith and was to give him a big sum if he got us safe to our ship. All this is the truth, and if I tell it to you, gentlemen, it's not to amuse you, for you've not done me a very good turn, but it's because I believe the best defense I can make is just to hold back nothing and let all the world know how badly I have myself been served by Major Sholto and how innocent I am of the death of his son. Very remarkable account, said Sherlock Holmes, a fitting wind-up to an interesting case. By the way, I had hoped that Tonga had lost all his darts, yet he managed to shoot one at us in the boat. Oh, he had lost them all, sir, except the one which was in his blowpipe at the change. Ah, of course, said Holmes. I had not thought of that. Is there any other point which would you like to ask me about? Asked the convict affably. I think not, thank you, my companion answered. Well, Holmes, said Athelney Jones, you're a man to be humoured, and we all know that you're a connoisseur of crime, but duty is duty, and I've gone rather far in doing what you and your friend asked me. I shall feel more at ease when we have our storyteller here safe under lock and key. The cab still waits, and there are 2 inspectors downstairs. I'm much obliged to you both for your assistance. Of course you'll be wanted at the trial. Good night to you. Good night, gentlemen both. Good night, gentlemen both, said Jonathan Small, and the 2 of them left. Well, there's the end of our little drama, I remarked, after we had spent some time smoking in silence. I fear that it may be the last investigation in which I shall have the chance of studying your methods, though. Miss Morstan has done me the honour to accept me as a husband in perspective. Holmes gave a most dismal groan. I feared as much, said he. I really cannot congratulate you. I was a little hurt. Have you any reason to be dissatisfied with my choice? I asked. Oh, not at all, he said. I think she is one of the most charming young ladies I have ever met, and might have been most useful in such work as we have been doing. She had a decided genius that way. Witness the way in which she preserved that agate plan from all the other papers of her father. But love is an emotional thing, and whatever is emotional is opposed to that But love is an emotional thing, and whatever is emotional is opposed to that true, cold reason which I place above all things. I should never marry myself, lest I bias my judgment. I trust, said I, laughing, that my judgment may survive the ordeal. But you look weary. Yes, he said, the reaction is already upon me. I shall be as limp as a rag for a week. Strange, said I, how terms of what in another man I should call laziness alternate with your fits of splendid energy and vigor. Yes, he answered, there are in me the makings of a very fine loafer and also of a pretty spry sort of fellow. By the way, apropos of this Norwood business, you see that they had, as I surmised, a confederate in the house, who could be none other than Lao Rao, the butler. So Jones actually has the undivided honor of having caught 1 fish in his great haul. The division seems rather unfair, I remarked. You have done all the work in this business. I get a wife of it. Jones gets the credit. Pray, what remains to you? The division seems rather unfair, I remarked. You have done all the work in this business. I get a wife out of it. Jones gets the credit. Pray, what remains for you? Well, for me, said Sherlock Holmes, there still remains the cocaine bottle, and he stretched his long white hand up for it. End of chapter. End of story. A great adventure with twists and turns and a happy ending. Watson found a bride. Holmes found a challenge to lift him out of his lethargy for a while. Are you a Sherlock Holmes fan? My next choice will be The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. And remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.